Hello again, I'm Alister Benn, and this is Vision and Light. This week I'm speaking with Jennifer Renwick, who is someone who has been on my radar for quite a number of years now, pretty much as soon as she started posting images online. And what I want to do before we start this week's discussion is to kind of summarize where we are with Vision and Light. It started with Adam Gibbs and myself just sharing a few conversations that we used to have, and well, still do have on a regular basis. But as we've expanded out to include a bigger circle of our friends and peers, the thing that's coming through in all of this is that the amount of true inspiration that the people who I get to talk to have to share is huge. And that inspiration, motivation, the way we live our lives, the way these people are out there in the landscape engaging and feeling and expressing and caring for the landscape is inspiring. And this inspiration is the spark that sets us on fire. And if there's one thing that I want Vision and Light to do, and the whole Expressive channel to do, it is to ignite that spark in every single person that we manage to communicate to. So Jennifer is someone who is full of passion, full of empathy. She finds herself in the landscape and she expresses all the nuances of her personality through her photography. She has a quiet voice. She focuses mostly on intimate scenes. But as you can see on the screen behind me, there's also her amazing dolphin images off the west coast of California. The conversation Jennifer and I had was truly a great experience for me. It's an honor for me to call Jennifer a friend, and I get a huge amount of inspiration from her work. So sit back, grab a glass or a mug of your favorite beverage and digest this one over 1, 2, 3 or more numerous listenings, because I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. I'd like to introduce to you the one and only and the great Jennifer Renwick. So Jennifer, nice to see you here. Thank you for coming on the show.
It's nice to see you again, Alister, and thank you so much for inviting me to come on.
You're really welcome. You're really welcome. We were just reminiscing a little before we started this, and the last time we actually talked was April sometime when we did an NPN, a Niche Photographers Network webinar with you and David Kingham.
So.
We were saying it feels like a long time ago.
It does. This whole year is kind of dragging.
It's an odd one.
Because it's so horrible.
Yeah. Well, I mean, do you feel that you're going to get something out of it? I mean, is it making you reevaluate and so forth?
Oh, definitely. One thing, David and we talked about this recently, was that, this COVID quarantine, staying at home, kind of changing plans, not traveling and doing workshops, it's really challenged us to do things that we never thought we'd ever do. Like if you had asked me a year ago, like, oh, you want to do a video interview, or, do you want to do this webinar together? I would have said no, just because I wasn't comfortable on video. My own self-confidence kind of blocked that. And I didn't think I could, get past that. And, when we started this whole quarantine thing, David and I sat down and we said, okay, we have to get creative with the business. We definitely want to stay alive. We've worked so hard for our business over the last 5 years together. We're not just going to watch it sink. Let's evolve. Let's be creative and see what we can come up with. And we started doing a lot of collaborations with Sarah. She's a dear friend and an excellent colleague to have. And the more we did that, the more comfortable it became. And we thought, okay, we can do this. So we've slowly been dipping our toes into other things. And I'm actually collaborating with Sarah on an exciting new project that we'll be doing in a few weeks that involves, video and webinar and a little bit of YouTube. So that's exciting. Awesome. And that's something that I never would have done last year or in years past, because despite my personality, I can be quite shy. And, I kind of flirt with that line between, introvert and extrovert. There are definitely times I'm more extroverted, but the majority of the time I'm very much an introvert. So all of this has been challenging, but a good challenge. I've, embraced it with open arms, and it's been fun, and collaborating with colleagues is, just exciting. So I'm glad that this kind of pushed me over my comfort zone, and it's been really fun.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, I'm all about the psychology of everything, and I was watching a TED talk yesterday by a psychology professor, and she was saying that the most important attribute in education and business and people's general life success is grit. It's the thing that's the most important thing. It's not IQ. It's not how rich your parents were or the opportunities that you have in life. It's grit and determination.
Yeah.
So how do you think that this is going to impact your creative side? Because obviously, if your work is a reflection of who you are, if your perspective on life in terms of what you think you're capable of doing can change, do you think that's already showing itself through your creative work?
I think so. This has been a platform, this whole new technology wave that we're kind of all riding with this has been a good platform to kind of showcase what I really care deeply about with my own photography. And that's focusing on, smaller scenes, natural abstracts, and just slow photography in general. And, I'm a big proponent on, no expectations, just getting out and, shooting true to yourself. And a lot of these webinars, I should back up. We teach that in our workshops. We spend a lot of time on slow photography, just wandering around, not having expectations. We really take pride in, our workshops that we try to instill in our clients and students. We want you to be a well-rounded photographer. So if you are approached one day with, completely blue skies, here's something that you can work on. Or, harsh light, that's a great opportunity for black and white. And so we teach that in our workshops, but these webinars have really given me the chance to dive deeper into what I really enjoy talking about. And that's slow photography, storytelling in the landscape, and really using your emotions to kind of help form your photographs. So I don't know if it's made me more creative. I've just enjoyed teaching more, what's true to myself. And the feedback has been wonderful. And, there's a big place in this world for this kind of photography right now. I think people are kind of, they've done the workshops where, you're lined up and, oh, you're going to shoot this mountain at f8 and, ISO 200. And that's not creative. So David and I, we don't teach that way. You'll never see us lining our clients up to shoot something. What you will see is, it'll be David and I, and then our group of clients, like milling about, wandering about, like really getting out into nature, and then us kind of going around and, asking them some questions to kind of stir some creative processes. And, that's us, we're just not the type of workshop instructors that just line people up, catch every sunrise, sunset. There's so much more to it. And we really dig deeper.
But this is what's changing. I mean, obviously I've got the YouTube channel and the whole message that I'm putting forward is about, and I think you kind of hit it on the head there by saying you try to teach people to be more rounded photographers, whereas I think that involves teaching people to be more rounded individuals.
Yes.
And I think this is where the two parallels exist, is that it's our creativity can only be a function of who we are. And if we're more rounded and open and, as you say, less expectations and less judgmental and this type of thing. So this is why I'm kind of poking
that's okay.
Because, I'm so fascinated now between the relationship between people like yourself. And I think the reason I wanted to have you on the show was this conversation that we'd had when it was you and me and Alex and David and Sarah. And there seemed to be a very strong resonance in the group between us all basically agreeing about the kind of state of contemporary landscape photography. Now, this is a real hit you on the head type question. Where do you see yourself on the timeline of landscape photography? Because obviously we've got this history rushing into the background with people like Gail and Raoul and Ansel, and you and I are on a timeline now in 2020. How do you see where you are and your contribution to landscape photography, and where do you think we can help move things? Because our photography is in our hands now.
So I'll start off by just kind of like from a personal level. So I've only been doing this full time and professionally for 4 years. Um, I started out doing it as a hobby. You could put that on the timeline like 7 years ago. And when I say hobby, I had a full-time job. I lived in the Midwest, and I became very interested in photography to really chronicle the details and beauty and nature that I was seeing. So it's kind of like the same story as a lot of people. Um, and I was only photographing on vacation, so it was 3 times a year, and it just got to the point where, I said, there's so much more to life. I really want to dive into this. And funny story. So David and I met, he'll kill me probably for sharing this, but that's okay. I was actually a student on his workshops. I know, scandalous. I had followed him for a while, and I decided to take one of his workshops to get more serious about it. And I enjoyed his work. I enjoyed his blog. And from there we met. It was an instant connection. We stayed in touch. We started dating long distance. And I said, you know what? I think this is something I want to pursue. It's time to get out of the working full-time life. I just need a break. At the time I was working in veterinary medicine, so it's very high paced. Compassion fatigue is a real thing. It's a rewarding job, but it's a very difficult job. And I think a lot of people just think you play with, dogs and cats all day, and it's far from it. So after 14 years, I said, I just need a break. And I was going through some life changes. I had just gotten divorced. So I took the chance, literally picked up everything I had, sold a lot of my possessions, and just moved west to do this full-time travel thing with David. And so that was 4 years ago. And that really started. And when I did start out in photography, I did chase landscapes. I chased the light. I had expectations. I wanted to shoot what would make other people happy. And it was very unrewarding. So after about a year of doing this with David, I had a moment in Yellowstone National Park where I was photographing abstracts. And I also have a background in geology. Yep. And Yellowstone was somewhere where I visited over 20 years ago with a college trip, mapping out the geology in Wyoming. And I was amazed. So combining my love of geology and the processes with photography, Yellowstone is my Disneyland. So, you can ask Sarah and Alex and everybody when we were in Yellowstone a few winters ago. I like giggle with glee, like when I get out there in the thermal features and it's like, oh my gosh. And, I run around and it's like the happiest place on earth for me. So it was there that I had the realization, you know what? I'm just going to shoot what I love. I don't care what other people think. I don't care if this doesn't sell a print, but it's me. This is more representative of who I am versus this postcard scene with some pretty clouds and some great light. And that was a turning point. So I really started to slow down, wander, observe. With a background in science, 2 science degrees, and my dad was actually a scientist. I approached nature with a very inquisitive nature, no pun intended. I have a very innate curiosity of how the world works. I was painfully shy as a child. I was an only child. And my escape was nature. We had a backyard with a pond, and you could find me out there every day, catching tadpoles or, studying the fish and the turtles and the little bugs. And it's carried on to my photography. So I'm very visual. And I believe that comes from being a geologist and working in veterinary medicine too, because rocks can't talk to you to let you know what happened, and animals can't tell you what's wrong with them. It's all visual cues. So I've translated that over to my photography. And that's when I finally said, you know what? This is more my style. The smaller scenes, the abstract, shooting these little moments and details that often go unnoticed, like that's me. And I don't care if I sell prints. I don't care if I'm the most popular on Instagram, but it's what sings to me. And from that point on, I transitioned to the slow photography world. I got involved with the slow photography movement. Ernesto Ruiz kind of created this platform for it. And he reached out to me early on and said, would you like to be a full-time, contributor in this? So I've been doing that for a few years, and that's really helped, kind of spread the word and open my eyes even further. And then David and I have put more of a focus on contemplative, small scenes, and just that, photographing what makes you say, oh my goodness, I love this, without even thinking. So on the timeline of things, I feel that photography has definitely gone from more of the, these dramatic, grand, wide scenes, that everyone wanted to shoot. I came in kind of late to the game. I know 500 pics was around, long before I came in, and Instagram. But I do think that there is a transition now on this timeline with other photographers like, myself, Sarah, too many others to name,
Alex,
but
Steve Bosboom, yeah.
yeah, we've all kind of like taken this and grown this little idea. And I really think people are interested in it. And I think it's just the next step in the evolution of photography. And, things, go back and forth and, just like anything else in this world. But I do like the trend that I'm seeing. We're definitely seeing a lot more interest in slowing down the contemplative side of it, telling stories with your emotions or subjects in the landscape. And that's really the core of David and I both, really. And it's exciting to see that progress, because that's something 4 years ago that, if we had put that out there, people would be like, that's kind of boring. Like, no, I want to go chase the weather, chase the light.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I just want to say that, David and I still enjoy a really good burning sunset. We'll get excited about weather, but it's not our focus anymore. And it's been this complete eye-opening revolution to us and our photography. And I'm excited to see where this goes in the timeline, because the feedback we've gotten from clients and students and, even other colleagues, it's all very promising that photography is headed in this new direction.
I agree 100%. And it's certainly where I'm at as well. And I think the main reason for that is it's very obvious to understand why, is that, there's so many people out there now. There's a certain amount of one-upmanship kind of goes on. And
yes.
If you go to the same places, it really depends upon getting the amazing conditions and then processing the ass out of it, to make it look even more dramatic. Or if you don't get the conditions, like dropping in skies and doing all sorts of stuff like that. And it just becomes super competitive.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally understand that it's much more self-validating and self-actualizing. Now, something I want to poke you some more with.
Go for it.
Is you've mentioned a couple of times now about storytelling. And this is a concept that people have spoken to me a lot about in the past, not so much on the show, but face to face and, different photographers. And this concept of storytelling. Now, I want you to educate me about what you mean by storytelling. And so that's the first part, is what do you mean by storytelling? And secondly, when you're looking at smaller scenes and intimate scenes, you were talking about telling stories with emotions. Mm-hmm. So that's the kind of second part of that, is that what's the story and how is it being articulated?
Okay.
I'm just going to sit back for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah. Oh my, I hope I answered these well. Okay. So I love telling stories in the landscape. And that kind of started with my love of natural abstracts. There's so many details in the landscape that go overlooked. It's easy as you're rushing out to catch a sunrise or a sunset to walk right by this, pretty little stream that would make, beautiful water patterns with a slower shutter, or mud cracks on the ground that are just catching, a little bit of the twilight light and glowing. And one thing I like to do with my photography, especially with my abstracts, is turn the ordinary into extraordinary, because I like to tell their story. There are little details in the scene, but, they deserve kind of their spotlight as well. And I think it's, especially poignant to me because, obviously that's my love. I love abstracts. But even if it's not an abstract, there are trees, there are certain plants, even sand dunes kind of tell a story. So I like to combine, use some compositional elements, going back to the basics to kind of line up the story. But I really like to share the story of the subject that I'm shooting. For instance, last fall in Yellowstone, I have a picture of a little tree on a rocky outcrop that's has the background of kind of part of the lower falls of Yellowstone and the mist that's being backlit.
We'll put that up on the screen now.
Okay. And then, I saw that tree and it was an instant personal connection because, like I said, I have a personal relationship with nature. It's not just, here's a plant, here's a tree. I feel like I live and breathe the elements out there because I get so emotionally attached to things. And I saw this tree and immediately I wanted to tell the story of the tree. why was he on the outcrop alone? Where were his, buddies, so to speak? Like, why weren't there any other trees growing on the rock with him? How long has he been there? And all of these emotions kind of came into the story. And the word that came to mind first was just, forsaken. And a lot of the times, I shouldn't say a lot. I'd say maybe it's probably like 70, 100, or 70, 30%. 70% of the time, I'm trying to, convey, it sounds silly, but like the emotions of the subject that I'm shooting. And I understand trees don't have emotions, they don't cry, they aren't human, but to me they do. When I see them in certain types of light or weather conditions, they invoke these emotions in my own mind that I can relate to. So this little tree on this rocky outcrop just looked forsaken, and I thought, I've felt that way numerous times in my own life, just kind of left behind, or you don't really have a lot of hope, and you're all alone. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. So my goal is to use the imagery kind of with an emotion that I too have felt that's familiar, and take a subject and hopefully, convey that to the viewer of the image. And a lot of my images get a lot of reactions from people, which is good, because, you want the viewer to connect or ask questions about your photography and your images. And especially my dolphin images, which started out, and I'm going off on a tangent now, but that started off as a complete personal project for me. I had no intentions of showing that to the world. It was just a personal project because my mom had recently passed away while we were in Death Valley, and David escaped, the ocean. I should back up. The ocean has always been a big part of my life. Both of my parents were master divers. They threw me in the ocean at like age 3. And I was very fortunate to spend most of my life diving and doing things in the ocean and swimming with sharks and dolphins and all this other stuff. So there was a connection there, and I had never seen the California coast. So after my mother died, he, whisked me off to the coast. He's like, let's get out of Death Valley and, head off to the coast and photograph, or just, relax. He didn't even say photograph. So we got out to the coast, and, we tried to be tourists to kind of, get my mind off things. And we went out on a whale watching expedition. And I brought my camera with just to record if we saw whales, just do the typical thing. And we got out there, and I saw these dolphins. And, my mother was a huge, she was huge with my love of the ocean. And she constantly put me in situations where I could connect more with it. And that was usually with, dolphins. Like I have many fond memories of swimming with wild dolphins with her, and, just really, really fun times. And, I saw these dolphins, and I thought, oh, my mom would have loved this. Like, look at this. And I just got my camera out, and I just started photographing the dolphins. And we got home that night, and I was going through my images, and I looked at some of them, and I went, there's something here. Like, there's a connection. Like, this is a personal project forming. And I processed them in black and white because at the time, when you lose a loved one, or anyone for that matter, my grieving process went from the extremes of like black to the very dark days, the very dark moments where, you feel like you're in a hole. You miss that person so much, it hurts, to the extreme white. You have brighter times. You think of the memories, they're comforting. You all of a sudden have renewed hope and joy. You've taken solace in the fact that they're gone, but you'll move on and, always keep them in your heart, to all the little tones of gray in between, which are the days where you just go up and down with your emotions. So I said, you know what? I'm combining the dolphins, which is a very fond memory of my mother, and I'm doing black and white because of, kind of what I just outlined. Yep. And I combined the two, and it turned into a project, and that, connects with people more than I ever thought it would. And I wasn't even going to release it to the public. I was like, this is just something for me, maybe I'll print it out and put it on my wall, and it'll be, a story when people come over to visit. Sure. But David encouraged me to put it out there. And it was featured in a Lenswork Seeing in Sixes book. I finally got the confidence to put it in there. And every year we go to the coast, I have befriended a boat captain, and he'll take us out like privately, and we search for these dolphins, and it's, like seeing old friends. And my collection is slowly growing, and I've got bigger ideas for it now. But the amount of people that said, this resonates with me. I lost my parent, my mother, a friend, or I grew up on the ocean, and, just the depth of the black and white really affects me. And I know I'm totally going off on a tangent, but I will come back around, I promise. But it's a good example of photographing what you're passionate about. When you combine your passion with your camera, people connect to your images. And to date, those are my dolphin series is the one that people really connect with. So, I like to tell stories that way. But going back to the landscape, I really like telling the stories of subjects, whether it's mud, whether it's a tree, whether it's canyon light. I just feel that a lot of the times I can use my own emotions to kind of convey what I'm feeling, but also align it with that subject. And maybe, that tree all of a sudden is me. Like I see myself in that element. And I just really enjoy storytelling that way. So it's a little different. I mean, storytelling in landscape photography can be a little difficult because we're not photojournalists. So it's a little different there, but I do equate it to kind of like, we are there to tell the story of the landscape. The landscape can't talk to you. So all of these moments deserve, their time in the spotlight too. And, if I can do it on a level that, using the mood of the time or my processing to really kind of convey that to the viewer, then I feel like I get so much more pleasure out of that than just like posting something to 500 pics and being like, look, an amazing picture of, this mountain and this great weather. So in turn, it helps feed my soul as well, instead of just putting it out there for people to see. And what was the second question? I should have written it down. I feel like I'm in school.
No, well, the thing about these conversations is that the spontaneity of your answer and the way that you want to tell your story is important, because, this is why I don't have scripted questions, because I think we're photographers because we're passionate. And I think we're photographers because we're emotional and we have a need to express these emotions. And an awful lot of what you've been talking about, the words that were kind of conjuring in my own mind at the time were empathy and resonance. And it's almost like anthropomorphism to a certain extent. It's almost like, we talk about equivalence in photography. And I think that's really where, for me anyway, and without being judgmental about, the different types of photography, I think that's where the real rewards are, is that why would we want to focus on ego and popularity when we've got all of these other incredible emotional stories that we can get in touch with to become more rounded individuals, which is what we started off with, 25 minutes ago. So no, the second part of the question was a little bit more technically minded in terms of how can we portray emotions in our images, because obviously a lot of the subjects that you're talking about are inanimate. Trees and mud are particularly static, but I guess there's a lot of implied motion and flow in those. So we can use dynamics, I suppose. But then in terms of processing, do you use like color transitions and different temperatures and tints do you spend a lot of time in processing, or do you tend to be quite broad brushstroke?
So I am not technically very good with Photoshop, despite, living with David and yeah, he's very good at it. I struggle with it. I mean, he's taught me things. A lot of people are surprised to know that I will spend about 5 or 10 minutes on an image and then I'm done. So I do most of my work in Lightroom. I try to capture it as much as is, so I'm not swapping skies. I'm not adding things that aren't there. And again, if anyone else does that, that's totally fine. That's the beautiful thing about photography and art. You can do whatever you want. And
we're so cool.
yeah, but I try to play to like the mood of the lighting. The color temperature plays a big factor. So if it's a little more subdued, kind of sullen image, I tend to go toward the blue side. Obviously happy, more joyful, I go to the warmer side. Black and white, you can tell if I'm pretty moody because I'll do a lot of processing in black and white, just because I feel like there's such a depth there and a gamut that you can use to portray different emotions and what you're feeling. And yeah, really, so processing, I keep it very simple. I don't try to overthink it, and there have been times in my past where I'm staring at an image going, I don't know, is it there? Does it need something? And, David will remind me, you're overthinking it. I'm like, you're right. And I'm a big proponent too of just walking away from an image for a few days and then coming back to it with fresh eyes. That's huge. But yeah, they're using color and processing are definitely good ways to tell a story. Some people struggle with sharing their emotions, verbally.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm that way too. And, when we talk about this in our workshops, I've got one story that really hits home is, we had a man who was taking our workshop, and at first, he said, yeah, I'm here for, just to get the good landscape shots and, show me around. And, you guys really know, Death Valley really well. And that's why I'm here, so that's what I'm here for. So, don't mind, I'll listen to your presentations and stuff, but, don't take it personally if I just don't use anything. And we were like, that's totally fine. You're here with an open mind. That's a good first step. At least you're in our workshop. So as the days progressed, we both gave our presentations, and, we do things in the field like photo walks. So we'll encourage our clients, we'll take them somewhere, and we say, for the next 15 minutes, you're going to go off and you're just going to photo. Don't talk, don't second guess yourself, just literally shoot what you see, what interests you, and just go with it. And, a lot of people get so much out of that because it's so eye-opening. And at the end of the photo walk, he came back and he said, I have this little plant here. And before, I should preface that, he said, he never photographs with his emotions. He's not an emotional guy. And he came back that evening when we were going over our, sharing photos session. And he showed us this photo, and he's like, he's like, I felt something for this tiny little dead bush. And it was like, oh, did you? And he kind of explained it. And by the end of it, he kind of went, oh, well, I guess I shared my emotions, but I didn't have to, speak them. I used this plant. He's like, I've been that plant, kind of parched in the desert and, old and crispy. And, you kind of feel like you don't have a place in life anymore. He's like, I just related to this plant. And it ended up being one of his favorite photos of the entire trip, which was funny because he wasn't there for that, but he opened himself up. And he took those few days to kind of take it all in. And it was just exciting to see him walk away with that and kind of approach it with that new, new eyes. But, so I definitely think that even if people, have a hard time expressing their emotions verbally, I really feel that, eventually they kind of come to that point with their photography where they may not realize it, but they are sharing themselves in that photo. Totally. And it may take a little time to see that, but it's one of the exciting things we see in our workshop. And, when people have that aha moment, it's so rewarding. And, it's just so exciting that, you're opening up eyes to, there's more than just the pretty snapshot.
Absolutely. And for me, myself, I mean, it's become probably the most important focus of my whole work is realizing that the photos themselves, I mean, this is the thing I think that's the struggle nowadays, and I think this is why we might be seeing this paradigm happening, is that there's so many incredible photographs out there in the world these days that maybe, I mean, I'm into my 20th year now shooting, and back when I started in the early 2000s, it wasn't that hard to kind of make a name for yourself. There wasn't so many people doing it. So you could kind of burst onto the scene with a bit of energy and something different, and you would get noticed quite quickly. Now it must be impossible. I'd hate to be trying to start out now.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why people are realizing, well, wait a minute, if I want to be out in the landscape making photographs, there has to be more of a personal reason to do so. Now, talking about the landscape, we are seeing some quite strange phenomenon in that we saw lockdown. I know that the States hasn't been as massively locked down as some of the other countries, like Scotland. We are just coming out of lockdown now, and we've been in full lockdown. I think I saw my mother for the first time last weekend in 4 months. So,
oh my goodness,
major lockdown here. So what's happening is we're all starting to come back out into the landscape now, and we're seeing a lot of things in Scotland where people behaving extraordinarily badly, littering the places, defecating all over the place, driving all over the landscape. And I saw that you'd posted something on social media about, was it in Colorado? Was it up in the in the mountain pastures, there was a lot of bad behavior, similar bad behavior.
Yeah.
It seems as if our entire consciousness has eroded during lockdown, and that we've lost that kind of sense of social responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's definitely been a trend in the last few years, a negative trend, which is why we started Nature First. But like you said, especially coming off a lockdown, it's like, people have been, bundled up in their houses for a few months, and they get outside and they're just like, woohoo, we're going to have fires, and, who cares if there's a fire ban, we won't let it get out of control. And, we saw some bad behavior in Grand Teton, because we finally, after 80 days in Denver and following the rules, we said, you know what, we're going to escape for 2 weeks. We need the mental refresher, just to get back out into nature, because it's been a long time. And with our travel trailer, since we travel full time in it anyway, we know we can do it safely. We packed 2.5 weeks of food. We never went into towns. We hiked in the backcountry. We photographed at hours when, the tourists aren't really out. So we had no problem staying away from people. But, there was a ranger in Grand Teton, that we came upon one day after we were paddle boarding, and I felt so bad for her. I just wanted to give her a big hug. She was going along the shore of the lake, picking up all the trash that people weren't packing out. And she said, she's like, I feel defeated, because I feel that it's even worse now with COVID, because now people don't want to touch trash.
Yeah.
Even the people that do help and leave it better and pick it up aren't doing that right now, just because, we're afraid, there's a used Kleenex on the ground. You don't know if someone had COVID and you don't want to pick it up. But I felt so defeated for her. And it's like an even worse problem now than it was. And, you're just seeing, people, going off trail, especially now it's wildflower season in the Alpine Basin. So the tundra is, always very sensitive, but even more so now. And you're just seeing people, head out and drive off road. There was a post that one of our colleagues posted from Colorado, that all these people with ATVs and Jeeps were going off trail, driving in the tundra, for their Instagram photos, just excited to be out again. But yeah, it feels like an even bigger battle now, because people have been bottled up, and they're just excited to get out, but it's not translating well to the landscape. And it's like they've just completely forgotten, manners and the reason why they, need this connection with nature. They were so excited to get back out into it, but then it just becomes trashed and damaged. And there's just a little bit of lack of care there. So it's kind of sad to see.
Yes, it is. Now, you mentioned Nature First, and I've had conversations with previous guests. Adam and I did a special on Earth Day for Nature First, and I talked with Sarah Marino about it. And I know that you were and are heavily involved in it. When I spoke with Sarah, I felt that the numbers of people who'd signed up to support it was really low. I genuinely felt that I found it quite a depressingly low number, given that it's such a simple and positive message. So I want to do as much as I possibly can, and this is a great platform for it, because thousands of people see these things. Now, I think what we need to reiterate is that making a pledge to Nature First doesn't cost you anything.
Correct. Yeah, it does not cost anything.
Money.
No, it's not a plea for money.
Right.
It's just a plea to be, help be a better ambassador to the lands that we love, and help educate and lead by example, so others want to do the same. It's a little sad that the numbers are a little low. I mean, we still approach it with a very positive attitude. We're really hoping to hit 10,000 followers. They brought me on as a staff writer, so I've been writing some articles. Excuse me. I'm working on one right now about how to be a responsible workshop leader out in nature, and follow these principles in ways that you can, because unfortunately there are a lot of workshop leaders out there that we've seen with our own eyes that we know they don't have permits. We know that they're taking people to places that they're not supposed to go. They're damaging things to get the shot. Who cares if I trample these wildflowers? I'm going to get this amazing shot, and who cares? So I'm writing an article right now geared more towards workshop leaders, but we've also kind of, as you form organizations, you evolve. It's natural, and you try to say, okay, where are we going? What direction do we want this to go? And how can we get there? So in the last year, we've kind of taken more of, it was geared towards photographers in the beginning, but everyone in the world now has one of these,
right?
And they're using their cell phone. So we said, you know what, let's pull back a little bit and really gear this towards anyone that enjoys nature. So I put out an article a few months ago, and it was written with a very positive tune about cell phone photographers. How at a lot of these places in national parks, it's people with their cell phones or their iPads taking pictures. And I think that a lot of individuals thought, well, I don't shoot with a professional camera, so these don't really apply to me. Where it certainly does, even with a cell phone, because you still see people walking off the boardwalks to get a little bit closer, especially with cell phones, because let's be honest, the zoom on these
wide angle lenses.
Yeah. So, I can just get a little closer to that bison, and let me use my cell phone. And so I wrote an article geared towards that, and it got a lot of great feedback, and it got a lot of people excited. And a lot of the cell phone people thought, came back with, well, I just didn't see myself as like a photographer in that sense. But, we still want it geared towards photographers, but we're also going down this road of, anyone that enjoys nature has this wonderful opportunity to be these ambassadors to the, places that we love, and to help keep these places wild for future photographers and future generations to enjoy. So we definitely saw an uptick there. And we're just, we're constantly evolving and striving on ways that we can reach people. We're partnering with a few different companies, but really just to get the message out there. And, it always feels like an uphill battle, but that's part of the challenge. And even with all of these bad events that we're seeing, there are positive events. For instance, last summer we were hiking with Sarah and Ron up in an alpine basin in Colorado, and there were these people that had camped right on the lake. So they set up their tent, they had smushed wildflowers to put the tent there, for like a great Instagram photo when they woke up the next morning. And I very politely, just went up to them. I said, hi guys, I just want to let you know that in Colorado and elsewhere, you're really supposed to be like 150 feet away from the water. And there are established campsites here with fire rings, so if you don't mind, it would just be nice to see if you guys could like move there, so other people that come up here don't see your tent and then they, do the same thing, because I think it's a wonderful idea. And they were very receptive. And if you ask Matt Payne, we kind of have this thing, and my nickname is Ranger Jennifer. I probably should have been a ranger in a previous life. And I don't like yelling at people. I enjoy educating people, because the majority of the time they're completely unaware. They're not being ignorant on purpose. They just really don't know. Right. So the next day we went back to the basin to reshoot something, and they had moved their tent to an established campsite. Cool. So it was one of those moments where I thought, okay, see, like people are willing to change and listen. There will always be the bad apples, but it was just one little positive thing in this journey of, trying to help out these places and preserve them. That was exciting to see. And, we never want the negative connotation with Nature First. We're not out policing, we're not out to like report people and tell on photographers. It's really trying to be positive about our education and leading by example and inspiring others to do the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, Expressive Photography is prominently listed amongst your partners. And we're in a position where we're totally reevaluating our entire business model, because I think, and the way things are coinciding with an increased awareness of the sheer volume of incredible landscapes that we walk past every day. These small scenes, the intimate scenes, those personal things that we just notice that maybe 5 other people would walk right past.
Right.
I think if we combine those, that the rise in that, the popularity of that with conserving the landscape, I think it's a very compatible message. And we're restructuring our entire business because we don't want to be hypocrites. I don't want to be telling some people, well, you can't do this, and then I go off and do it because I'm a professional photographer. So yeah, well, you've got our commitment to this, and I'm increasing everything that I can possibly do to try and promote this, because it's more important than the photographs to me.
Yeah. And that's wonderful, Alister. We're so excited to have you on board with that. And, like you said, this is our time to help these places that we love so much. I mean, nature has given us so much. I mean, especially with myself, aside from my photography, it's allowed me to become the person I am just because, by taking those walks into nature and, recording what I see. And, I'm still hopeful. There's definitely there's hope in the air for it. And I really think we'll hit 10,000 members and really inspire more. We're constantly getting new community advocates from all sorts of different countries that want to be involved. So that's very positive. And David and I have restructured some of our workshop leadings to places, and we've kind of pulled back on some that we know, like, that's probably not an area that can handle that. Like, it's fine if one person goes there or we go there, but we would never take a group of 10 people there.
Right.
And because I mean, we're not, David and I aren't innocent either. I mean, in the past, I can remember 4 years ago, I'm sure I did a little trail through wildflowers to go get a shot. I mean, I'm guilty as well. We all are. And it's not about placing blame. It's just about learning from it and moving forward in a positive manner. And that's really what we try to do. And of course, we encourage people, I mean, if you obviously see someone driving off, road and crushing the tundra, definitely try to tell the ranger, get a license plate shot.
Yeah.
There was actually an example of this happening on our workshop with Sarah this fall or the spring winter in Death Valley. We were out photographing at Salt Creek, and it's a boardwalk. I'm sure you've been there and but it's where a good majority of the park's pupfish live. And we were out doing a photo walk. So I felt kind of bad because, this is the meditative time where we're out, photographing and, we're giving this time to our clients. And there was a guy off the boardwalk who was catching pupfish in a Rubbermaid container.
Whoa.
And there were 3 other men actually hiking, and they stopped and they told him, like, you're not supposed to be off the boardwalk. And, he ignored them. So Ranger Jennifer, because it was, it was making me very angry because, I mean, obviously with my background in veterinary medicine, I take the treatment of animals and wildlife very seriously. So I went up to him and I said, can you please get back on the boardwalk? And he ignored me. And I said, are you trying to catch pupfish? And he told me, mind your own business. And he called me something nasty. And one of the other random guys walking, really started giving it to him. And he got very aggressive. So I kind of backed off and just said, I'm just going to report it to the ranger. And, some of our workshop clients wanted to get involved, and we were just like, no, just, leave it. I said my piece, but, and I reported it to the rangers that evening. Unfortunately, I didn't have cell phone service,
Right.
The story of Death Valley. So I couldn't call dispatch, but, I mean, definitely report things that you see. We're trying to get away from, the tattletale and, because photographers can sometimes be not the nicest people. I've heard some stories, and we've heard stories from rangers in some of the parks about how, so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so. So they're falsely accusing them of something to lose their permit. And it's like, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's like high school, but yeah, just being better stewards and ambassadors to these places, and just, all we can do is try and hope and be positive. And, I think we've definitely created some differences. So we just hope that that's the upward trend. And
yeah,
that's all we can do.
It's funny because we talked about where we started. Well, where we started this conversation was about where we are on the timeline. And isn't it kind of interesting that we're talking less about making photographs, and we're talking more about what we can do to conserve the environment that we're trying to photograph.
Yes.
It seems much more like a purpose. When I speak to people like yourself, and probably most of the people who I speak to, because I speak to you for a reason, it's not random. The people who I like to speak to, it's our life is this.
Yes.
The photographs are just, to me, it's just a metaphor. That's all they are. It's just a metaphor for this relationship that we have with the landscape, and the desire to try and educate, a responsible attitude towards it. Because without it, we're all kind of screwed. We'll have to get a proper job if the landscape gets destroyed.
I know, right? Can you imagine going back to a job now? I certainly can't. I kept my license, you know, so in case someday, you know, in times like this, I haven't gone back to work, but you never know.
I know.
And I kept it as, you know, plan B. And, you know, David has something that he can go back to as plan B, but
I don't.
it's just, I don't really, maybe that's good because that really makes you like, I don't know. It's just, I mean, I literally woke up one day and said, I'm going to do landscape photography. Like, that's it. I'm moving west and this is what I'm going to do full time because I don't feel fulfilled in my current career.
Right.
And my, you know, just my deep love of nature is calling me down this road. And I mean, it's the happiest I've ever been is doing what I'm doing now. And, you know, I can't imagine ever going back. Since I'm a super emotional person, you know, I mean, I cry when I see a scene sometimes and, you know, I'm that deeply connected to it. And, you know, one of the reasons I moved out west full time was because anytime I left on a vacation, the mountains behind or, you know, places that I loved, I mean, I would seriously cry all the way to the airport knowing, you know, I'm going back to the Midwest. I'm not going to see these mountains for another few months. And, you know, I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but that's just how connected, you know, I am to nature. And that's how a lot of us are. And that's why we're doing this. I mean, you don't get into nature photography to walk red carpets or, you know, be popular and, you know, make millions of dollars. You know, we're in it because of our love. And that outweighs, you know, the money to, you know, how much money you make to any day of the week.
Well, you know, if we just for the people who are listening, David, yourself, and Kristin and myself are talking about hopefully getting some kind of collaboration together to do some kind of workshop. If we make that happen for next year, I'll make sure to bring a giant box of Kleenex with me so that you can wipe away those tears every time we leave it.
It sounds so ridiculous, but I mean, it's just, that's, you know, where my heart lies and that's, you know, where my soul is. And yes, let's definitely collaborate. We were so excited, you know, when David said one day, he's like, I talked to Alister and he's interested in, you know, collaborating next year. And I was like, oh my goodness, like that would be so exciting. And, you know, I just from our talk, you know, with Alex and Sarah, before and David, you know, and even now, like, I know that we really align in what we teach and what we feel. And it would be a lot of fun. So I certainly hope that, you know, this COVID thing calms down and maybe we get back to a little bit more normal next year because that would be really exciting.
Yeah, we're certainly hopeful of coming over at some point. TJ Thorne and I are looking to collaborate and Bill Neal as well. So yeah, it's turning into quite a, well, it's kind of a, I don't know how much vacation we're going to get, but there's going to be plenty of interesting work. Listen, you know, I find that whenever I have these conversations, they could just go on and on and on and on. And I just love talking to you, and your passion for what you do is exemplary. I just find it so inspiring. And I think what you've done with Nature First and what you've done with Nature Photographers Network, which again is something I hammer down people's throats at every opportunity. So I'll be linking to all of that stuff in the notes underneath the video. But for now, we will hopefully get to do this again at some point in the future.
Yes, yes, I look forward to it. I know there's so much. I mean, we could dive into so much more. It's crazy that an hour is already passed.
I know. It's well, you know, it just gives us an opportunity to build on this in the future. And I think something else I want to do is maybe have some more like kind of groupy type things as well. You know, sort of get a few people together from different avenues and different continents and things like that.
Yeah,
and try and get some cross-pollination of ideas as well.
I like that.
So listen, Jennifer, thank you very much. And please pass on a big hug to David as well. And,
I will.
I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yes, thank you so much again, Alister, for having me. It's been a great time.
Anytime.